Right, so today I want to talk about this story out of Flair, and it's basically this whole thing with Adele, and so this is basically a feminist, lefty, outlet that is complaining that Adele has to pay her husband a pretty large amount of money in their divorce settlement. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is this goes to show feminism has nothing to do with equality. It's the biggest lie, one of the biggest lies perpetrated upon society. That number one, feminism is a good thing, which it is to a very small degree, or at least a much smaller degree than what it currently is being perpetrated upon us. And somehow, again, it's founded upon equality. They don't want equality; they want supremacy, and for the simple reason that, I mean, several reasons. Um, if they actually wanted equality, they wouldn't have spoke up about this kind of stuff, because it's feminists who are the ones that were big supporters of these laws, these divorce laws, the alimony laws, all these kind of things that were implemented, and that yet it comes down on them. And when it doesn't benefit the women, which rarely is, this is very rare. It's almost always the woman is the one, or that gets more than she put into it. This is a very rare case where the husband is worth a lot less than the woman, and the husband gets a lot of money. And again, the reason why I wanted to point that out is it's very important, because this is equality. Again, personally, I don't think it's equality. I don't think that this guy should be getting this much, but it's feminists who support these laws. And if you're going to support these laws, you should be the first one lining up about how this is a good thing. Now, again, I wanted to make this video because feminists have absolutely no credibility whatsoever. I mean, for starters, until feminists start criticizing Islam, they don't have any credibility. Until they're perfectly fine with things like this, they don't have any credibility. They have negative credibility, because the amount of glaring contradictions they have is absolutely astounding. Again, the Islam is worse than, far worse than how women had it in, like, 50 to 100 years ago. Way worse. And yet they don't care about that. And again, they don't care because Muslims largely vote for the left, and Muslims are rather violent towards people that disagree with them. And white Christian people, not very violent with people they disagree with. In fact, very unviolent compared to other, ideologies. So that's why they're so heavily criticized, and because they're usually anti-left, anti-socialist, anti-PC. So that's the main reason why. And again, the point I really want to reiterate is it has nothing to do with equality. How we're taught this kind of, I mean, I understand why, but how we're taught this kind of stuff in society is absolutely astounding. It's the exact opposite. It's all female superiority, and it's not shrouded in it. It never has had any credibility. Even the early feminist movements didn't have a whole lot of credibility. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. They wanted the right to vote, but the reason men had the right to vote wasn't sexism or patriarchy. It was because the draft. And again, to argue that women were oppressed because they didn't have the right to vote is the exact same as, take the comparison. Men, would you rather not have the right to vote, or have the right to, and and not be subject? Okay, let's put it this way: not have the right to vote, not be subject to the draft, or have the right to vote and have to storm the beaches of Normandy, for example. If you've ever watched the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, which most of the interviews you see, those guys that the ones that survive, they'll tell you, yeah, that was, if anything, it was even more scary. It was even worse than how they portrayed it. Would you rather do that, be forced to do that? And again, going back about 150 years, there was a major war about every generation, pretty much, if not two. Like a lot of people fought World War One and World War Two, or stuff like that. So this idea that women were somehow oppressed because they didn't have the right to vote is astounding. Because again, the Supreme Court ruled men have the right to vote because they're subject to the draft, not because of patriarchy. And the idea makes no sense. And if you actually are against the patriarchy, like I mentioned, Islam is the first thing you should be criticizing, the first thing. And the fact that you're silent about that goes to show that any feminist that isn't critical of that, first things first, you deal with Islam, then you can deal with, your fake patriarchy of the past, in Western culture. And another big lie too is that women, got into the workforce because of empowerment, which is partially true, but the main reason is women had to go into the workforce because it was too hard to get by on one salary or one income, in the 1970s and 80s. And this is because governments were spending, out of control, basically out of control spending. And I think it was partially governments wanting to do that, and they thought to themselves, "Hey, if we could get women into the workforce, that's all the more money we could pillage and steal, and a lot of it they keep for themselves." Like I always mention, how many politicians do you know that are multimillionaires off $150,000 a year salaries? There's a lot of them. So clearly, there's some shady stuff going on. And like I say, to bring it full circle, I mean, you can go check out the article. It's super long. I didn't want to get into it. I didn't want to make it a 30-minute video. But again, they basically go on to complain about how, um, like, it's just glaring, like, astounding how stupid they can be. That they're literally their argument, they should basically just be honest. Their argument is feminism and equality is great when it benefits women, and it's not good when it doesn't. Like, just come out and say that already. Like, you're fooling a lot of people, but you're not fooling me, and you're not fooling most people with any shred of critical thinking skills whatsoever. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to make the video too long. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my BitChute channel here. Again, YouTube's going to ban me at some point, shadow ban me at some point. So check that out. And last thing, check out my email and PayPal. I got linked in the description. I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already.